you going to mute someone? I just don't have to do that. Good morning. At least it's morning here in the Black Stag Hojo. It's a pretty fancy name, Black Stag, but it's true. So I thought about different talk titles. Nothing really came to mountains and rivers, and which most of you know, mountains and rivers just means questions. So, and that way, since there's so much going on in the world, it might, in some sense, it's maybe better to open it up in that way, because there are a lot of things people might like to ask about, and I'm always ready to talk about anything. So, I mean, all of the things that are happening in our cities and terrible things that are going this way and that way, and the crazy commentary on everything is outlandish. Don't want to get too much into a particular discussion, so I don't do discussions much, but I do questions. You can have a discussion with me by asking questions. I sometimes say, come and get me, or I don't mean come and get me to be rude to me, but keep the questions not too circular, not too many aspects to it. I think very slowly, and I'm not just saying that. Very slow. I do everything very slow, except the things that I do fast, which are eat fast. I hear that's not good for you. And it's usually somebody who eats really slow who tells you that. I've been lectured by many slow eaters. Slow down. Aren't you concerned with your health? So if there are questions, I'd be happy to respond to them.
I have a question.
Certainly.
How should we work with right livelihood during all of the COVID stuff?
Slowly. And this is it's a good time to ask that. Do it slowly, rather than try to figure things out before the things that you're trying to figure out. Don't jump into algorithms immediately about everything. Stop it. Wait till the things that you're going to work with are relatively stable. That means haven't changed in 3 days, because everything is changing. And so if you watch closely, if you have a strong awareness practice and you're watching the comings and goings of samsara, of your mind and of your neighborhood, of your family, of your sangha, of your health, and all the other aspects of that the problem we call life. So do it slowly, rather than conclude, because sometimes the desire to conclude is like the desire to just get it over with. We don't like being in no person's land. I don't like that feeling. So I would say you might want to hang out there for a while, because that's the truth. No person. There is no personhood. It's so to one who understands this, they are not perplexed, nor are they flummoxed by anything. Nothing. I'm not saying they don't say, "Oh, we need to take care of that," or "Whoops, I didn't think that was going to happen." But it might be a good idea if you train your mind so that the clarity, the natural clarity that is everyone's birthright, begins to have some kind of room, some kind of spaciousness, some kind of openness, some kind of not any particular need for what, something else. The way that wanting something else shows up in from just a slight differentiation we're having in our mind. I kind of don't like that. If I could stop that or start this, so that happens. And then there's the extreme kind that I doubt that's happening with anyone here, but in the world, there's extreme is so intense that greed will trample on everybody to do what? To get its perceived solution, to get what it wants, and what it wants, even that is based on causes and conditions that are constantly fluctuating back and forth. So Shoto, like the job situation you were looking at doing, and we don't have to go into the details of that, but just go slow on that. if you don't settle down on something and clamp down on something, then when other situations, causes, and conditions coming around that make this not appropriate anymore, then if you haven't clamped down, then it's much easier to adjust or see, well, maybe we could go this way or go that way. Some people are very, very fixed, and which is a stand-in for stability, because fixity is not, or clinging or grasping or fixation or fundamentalism is not stability. It's blindness. It's ignorance. It's a kind of blindness. So as a student, if you're a student of mine, then my encouragement to you is, please see clearly. And how do you do that? You look at the issues, you look at the problems without, so you could say, prematurely going in and changing, twisting, planning ahead. Plans are great, but the thing that you know it's a plan if it fails. That's how you know it was a plan. And plans always need something, tweaking, or, well, that's not going to, no, I'll adjust this. And then even that we should go very slow and take some time. So further question about that, Shoto?
Yes. I notice even if I don't overtly act on something, I have this kind of window shopping mentality where I'm trying to get as many options in front of me as possible. So even if I'm not moving in that direction, can that window shopping mentality be too much with the situation?
Well, it could be, because it could be you need so much security and so many options that the options themselves, just to use a visual metaphor, just become blurry. And what becomes blurry is the actual situation, not that crisp concept around it. And that's when you start mistaking the concept about the thing for the thing. And that's when that thing starts to shift. You're still locked down on the concept about it. And it's moved on. It's 15 miles down the road, and now is bright blue instead of a taupe. So there again. Go ahead, please. You.
For me to work with that, will it feel like having to intentionally slow down?
You may have to intentionally slow down, but I recommend, as I'm sure you'll recognize, this is the way I teach, by watching how speedy you are, not by coming up with some kind of preconception about speed or slowing down or any of that, and actually watch the speediness, which will probably not be so comfortable. And if you actually just observing the speediness, unless there's a whole lot of impatience around it, probably will slow down on its own, because a lot of that speed is just unnecessary and just kicks up dirt. So we get so anxious, we want that. And here we're coming back to this second noble truth. Excuse me, wanting things to be other than they are, some other way. We want something else. The desire, the grasping, or if it gets intense, even the greed, can not only hurt yourself, it can hurt others. You might not even know it. A lot of the greed in the world is those individuals, if you want to call them that, who are greedy, actually feel like this is okay. This is how it is. I mean, I'm supposed to be. They wouldn't know that they're in the jealous God realm or the God realm for them. They wouldn't know that necessarily. They would just look at other people and say, well, that's your lot, and my lot is to be a famous movie star, and I'm so beautiful. We all know what that's like, to begin to look in the mirror and see who's actually there. That can be frightening if you've been covering it up for 30, 40, 50 years. And so if you want to look, if you want to see, get to know yourself, this is something I've been working on for a long time, just in this lifetime. I can help you, but I can't help you without your permission. And even with your permission, if anyone comes to me and asks, I'm always very tentative. I always watch very closely as how earnest, how serious they are. And I can tell. So, and I don't have to read minds to do it. There's nothing to read. There's just mind, and it doesn't belong to anyone. If you think it does, then you'll come to conclusions that are not helpful. Questions are good if you have them.
Isan bowing.
Isan.
More about work in the days of COVID. What I'm experiencing feels like a great amount of churning, that there's something to do, and then there's another thing that comes up and another thing that comes up. It's difficult to know what to respond to. How can I work with that?
Yeah. Well, of course, said a lot. Sharpen the blade. Sit down, and the very consciousness mind, whole body mind complex that is Isan should be in receiver mode as much as possible. And how do we do that? We practice receiving, and it's very hard to practice. Some people try to do this. It's called meditation in action. I don't teach that. I teach it individually to some people, depending on the issues they're having. But I always do it very, very individual. So, but I don't just say, here's what you should do for meditation in action. So train the mind. So keep a strong contrast. Sit down, hold still, just observe what moves. And then whatever kind of ritual or formal practice you do, that could be different with each person, unless you live in a monastery, and then everybody does it the same way, pretty much. And then when you get up and move into that difficulty that's coming and going, as you just described, then there's more ability to meet it and realize that you don't have to meet it and get a credential. Yes, I met this, or get a credential. How much, or get some kind of evaluation. How long is this going to go on? Okay, I'm doing this, and that should be done too. And how do I divide up my time? Am I close to what you're dealing with?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. And so I'm just saying, what happens is the mind is functions something like someone doing programming. It needs to find a solution. It's all, what's the problem and how do I fix it? And that's for those of you who are computer programmers, I'm sure you'll recognize what I'm saying, because that's basically what it is. What's the issue? What are the options? Are there how many outcomes are there? How many we just get clogged up with that. And what I would say is just slow way down, stay in your senses, don't maintain. When I say stay, I don't mean a maintenance of it, because that's actually slowly bleeds over into ignorance without even being noticed. The very nature of ignorance is not to notice. So the awareness of that you can't quite do it is closer to what I mean when I say, just watch what's moving. Watch the movement of it. Use the movement going from this is happening, that's happening. And I'll be very literal. This is going to take me 20 more minutes, and this needs to be done in 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, I've got to start working on this, or it'll collapse or go back into the place where I can't even work on it anymore for 3 weeks, and all those kind of, these are just structures that programmers deal with all the time. I'm not a programmer. I'm a deprogrammer. And that's scary to ego. Ego doesn't want to be deprogrammed, and it will make all kinds of promises to that aspect of the mind that will listen, saying, it'll be okay. Just let me come in the door. I just want to keep existing. I promise not to meddle with anything. I won't touch anything. I won't eat anything without your permission. Just let me come along on the road to enlightenment with you. Difficult, because everyone has their own load of frustration, which is just highly polished fear. Fear that you're going to lose control, that you're fear. Fear is that's the underlying thing, it seems, in any kind of simple thing. Well, I got this to do and I've got to do that. I don't have time. Am I going to have time to do that? Or maybe you don't have a wristwatch. You go, am I going to have time to do that? Ask your little 10 years from now, this will just solve it for you, because it will be tracked. Unless you listen to me, these things are going to be tracking you everywhere and telling you what to do next and how to live your life. You're going to be living your life out of countless numbers of algorithms that are reading your all of your sensorium. Please don't do it. Do not time your meditation with one of those. You could even leave it in the other room. Use what's called a analog clock. See these? They have little hands on them, and they go. Well, the second hand goes like that. Our hand moves about this fast. You notice how movement sometimes look like stillness? That's what Romi's dealing with.
Nicole.
Yes.
Nicole, the Minneapolis suburbs has a question.
Nicole.
She says, our situation here is escalating. I'm keenly aware of my fear for the safety of my family, wondering even if or when we should evacuate. How do I work with this fear today?
Well, that's it's Nicole Hench's, right? Yeah. So Nicole, that is so situational, and so it's like talking to someone and it's trying to get into a lifeboat when you're in your kitchen. One thing I would say is don't stop your sitting practice. Try to find some time to do that rather than just worry and go in circles. Since I don't know the specific situation, I'm happy to talk to you about it. If you want to call me or connect with me personally, I'm happy to help you with it. But it's not necessary. Excuse me. Which suburb do you live in, Nicole? Of course, I guess it doesn't matter anymore. The whole place is coming apart there.
And she's on YouTube, so
Yeah.
it'll take a minute.
On YouTube, okay. So some people are on YouTube and other people are. So this somehow is working out okay to have the YouTube on and Zoom also. Seems to be.
Seems to be.
Yeah. So otherwise, Nicole wouldn't be asking you a question. If you could ask me maybe something more specific, other than to continue to train your mind, I would say, and I don't think I may have to say this to you particularly, but I would not leave my house. I would not go out, and it's really dangerous because the energy that's flying every direction is based on people's fear they've never inspected. It's not just based on what the trigger, which is a horrible murder of this
George Floyd.
Yeah, Mr. Floyd, George Floyd. So that's anyway. I could talk to you personally about it if you'd like to. Further questions?
Kevin Bowing.
Kevin.
On this theme, I'm trying to articulate this in some way. So as a white person, I wonder how much my seeming ability to do nothing unless I have to is relative to my whiteness, or if it's relative to awareness practice. Because I see a lot of people of color who given their personal situation, their literal skin in the game, may well feel that they have no choice but to go out into the streets. And so I'm just very curious about this relative dynamic compared to...
And even though it might show up... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you
okay.
Go, you get the idea.
Okay, so even though the obvious contrast is white and black and brown and all of that, still there's other considerations that are just below that surface that make us even more unique. We are each so incredibly unique. This is why it is so difficult to see through the so-called personhood. That's why it's so difficult to see that, is because there's so many other levels of contrast going every direction. And so I'm not sure how to, a specific situation, the way I address that is say, don't do anything unless you have to, and try, if you can, not to get into some kind of evaluation of how well you're doing, or any kind of evaluation is going to be based on half-truths. All evidence is partial. Even the evidence for this murder, it's partial. Even though it's right in front of us, it's still not everything is there. Pardon me, I don't know what I have in my throat other than frogs from the pond, probably. But when I say it's partial, I don't mean to dismiss it. It's very important, but to come to any kind of intense, absolute right and absolute wrong conclusion, or I absolutely have to do this or absolutely have to do that, This may show up this way that you individually may need to do something. Like if someone talks to me, I said, don't do anything, but just train your mind so that they're as clear as possible, so that if you do happen to need to go out into the environment, go out and march with signs or interact or even confront someone or help others who are doing the same, or whatever the various ways that could show up, that you will do it out of a mind that is open and on receive, rather than on producing things that are coming out of fear that has been hidden up to this point. Excuse me. It's very difficult to control that. Once there's a crisis, then the mind starts to look for algorithms, how to get out of it, how to do something else, how to fix it. Please stop it. We've been doing this. What's happened there is horrible. We're right in the midst of it. We're right at the tip of the spear where it's happening. But this has been going on for millions of years. Millions. Human beings have been around for a long time. I sometimes say, not completely jokingly, what about the Peloponnesian Wars? Why should we forget those? People died and murdered each other in those. How about the Second World War? My father was killed. I was 4 years old. I never got to see him. Nobody's talking about that. That just happened. I don't know, 70 years ago, something like that. Not that anybody needs to. It's just that people are terrible. All war is just some kind of state-sanctioned aggression against someone else, and it's always about control. The humanity is totally submerged there. World leaders, I don't care how shiny they are, if their name is Churchill or whatever it is. I'm not going for right and wrong. I'm just saying, what is this? And that's what I would say. Train your mind so that you see so clearly that anytime you come into any kind of obstructions or aggression or any kind of fiddling around that escalates into people dying, people that situation, the way it showed up to me, is those people in uniform there probably had been joking about people, being light about these, instead of to protect and serve. It's to beat up and take advantage of and push around and take our own frustrations. That person who committed that, all four of those people, as sometimes it's said, they have families, they have children, and they go home to their families. But that's the contrast part of it. The deeper part of it is that they have no mind training. Most religions, very little mind training. It's more about control. Even our tradition. Go practice in Japan. And I'm not saying they're evil or bad or anything. My teacher, I've been there. I practiced over there. My teacher, of course, Goichi Roshi. But even he, when he came here, was beginning to see the way forms are used to control. And so he wasn't about to do away with it, but we need to use the forms to help us, not just help us train our minds to liberate ourselves, not just to something to obey and so on. So pardon me for rambling a little bit, but if you want to take that question or refine it a little bit or bring me back to square one, I'd appreciate it.
No, I guess what I'm experiencing is like the more that I've been practicing in this environment, the more leaden I feel in a way, like I just couldn't force myself to do anything. And what, I mean, aside from, donating and listening to friends and keeping informed, but like, I just know, like, I don't want to go out and get hit with a club or set a car on fire, or, there's some sense of like self-preservation, which feels very primal and choiceless in this. But there's also, as you've described, this intense like social propaganda, even from sort of like liberal left people who are like, if you're not here, you're the enemy, kind of a thing, which is creating just a lot of dissonance in this, knowing that I'm not going to do anything about it, but also feeling the sort of ambient social pressure and so on.
Well, I probably don't have to say that what that's based on. That's based on fear. And since the person who is saying that and trying to push you into something based on fear and based on and wanting to control in order to be able to subdue the fear. That would be like me saying everybody should meditate. Everybody should be a Buddhist. I mean, not the same, but similar to just because of the way I see this. It's very disrespectful to others. And this is where the war starts. I say, don't go to war. And I also say, don't go to peace. This is another example of someone, don't take a position on anything. And that way you will see the nature of positions. Once you take a position, and this is took me a long time to take this so-called position. I resisted this for a long time and I don't know if I had some kind of reason. A lot of it was just narcissism. I didn't want to look too fancy. I felt like I had some understanding, and I found out I didn't have any. So therefore, I was able to become a monk. I'm not kidding you. You don't need the kind of understanding that is about right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, good and evil, all of that. That's I'm not saying that doesn't have its merits, or it doesn't have its validation. And there are plenty of people who dealt with that and are far more intelligent and kind and wonderful and saint-like. So I'm not saying that I'm going to tear the whole Christmas tree down, but it's look closely, live your life. Don't miss your life. I say it over and over again. Be genuine. And that situation in New York, of course, or as Nicole
she's in Medina.
She's in Medina, yeah. So, the situation that anybody's in anywhere is going to be we're all in this chaos situation, as you know. I don't know anything to say other than train your mind, and less is better, because most of the stirring up situation is, and as I've said before, I've mentioned before, we're way out in the country, have a couple of neighbors, and one of them has a Trump flag on their flagpole. A little difficult to know that next door neighbor has that kind of a dynamic going on. I don't think it's wrong. I think they're suffering too. They have their difficulty. The president of the United States, that regardless of how proud of himself he is, it's still a difficult situation. He might even be considering not doing that anymore. And he could make it look like a totally, well, of course, I was only going to do this for a little while. Now I need to graduate to the next level, which is king of the universe or something. So, which maybe he should be doing better at that. I'd be happy to help in that king of the universe.
When you're bowing, what do you mean, king of the universe? How would you help?
Well, I would. Well, I would. Then he would be actually leaving his tethers to the rest of the society. He would do it totally in his head. He would be in what they used to call the castle. Insane asylum. That's right. No, not a judgment, just an observation. So don't go to war with war. And when you see intense suffering, or anybody who's making a big fuss in the form of complaining about somebody else who just made a big fuss about somebody else who made it, it's just so very, very circular. And as far as us being in danger, let's say less is better. Don't turn into some kind of a hero and jump into a burning building. The building, that match was struck centuries ago. And the building sometimes burns a lot, and then it cools off, and then they add more rooms to it called other nations, other politics, and then it starts to burn again because there's no underlying foundation of truth to that. There's just constant control and passion, aggression, and ignorance.
Michael Bowen, you talked earlier in the week about anger.
I did.
Been looking looking at that, and it seems to me that you come back to control whenever you speak about anger. Even in myself, I think that when I get angry, it's because I want to control.
Yeah, it's basic.
Is that
Yeah, it's just impatience, simply put. And that doesn't solve the problem. It just means wanting something else, namely for this to happen or that to happen is not happening. So we start to get angry. When things don't go, as they say, our way. And the way I talk about it is don't do anything with it, but observe that. If you try to do anything with it, it, so to speak, goes underground, and then it shows up in another time when it gets triggered, and then it tends to collect. It's called the Alevijnana, and it's in the gatekeeper there, of course, is the seventh consciousness, or the watchdog of the whole consciousness structure here. It is very hard to see. Takes a while. It may take a long time, but don't give up. Just keep. It's called a spiritual path. You don't get things on a spiritual path. If you're getting anything on the spiritual path, it won't last, especially if you stay on the path. You can make it last by finding a rest area, which is called, I finally got there. I'm finally peaceful. I'm finally no longer making war with anyone. Notice my body language? Go ahead.
Okay.
Any questions if you have them, please.
Wasn't bowing.
Yes.
Earlier, you said you gave the example of your cell phone and said 10 years from now they'll be running our lives, and you said don't do it. But at the same time, in order to participate, even what we use here with WhatsApp and Ring and Facebook and everything, if your phone is watching you and the algorithms are based on your participation, how can you be with and participate in society without getting bombarded with the stuff that you don't even know?
Very good question. And so I would say we aren't going to be able to, rip ourselves away from the body politic. We're going to have to deal with that because we're here and we're in this particular century with this particular. I'm doing my best as someone who's been around probably longer than anybody here. Excuse me, to try to find a way to safeguard this particular mandala as much as I can before I go back into wherever this came from, and something that is not closed down to society, but is not necessarily, it's like spiritual distancing. I think I talked on that, and there's lots of other people or religious people that talk about that kind of distancing in a much different way than I do. But it's like something about the whole shape of that could be looked at. And so with the COVID-19, of course, we're doing the best that we can in contact with people who are health professionals, and with it's confusing because you don't have any actual leadership on the national level. So therefore, I don't need to go into that for any of you that watch the news. It's just complicated and difficult. Don't have good leadership. So I would say less is better. It's just like I use this phone all the time. I've thought about throwing it in the pond, but probably would scare the fish. I haven't done that. And I use it. I text, as you know, I text to people and communicate. And so the communication part is, I think, far outweighs all of the risks there of being under the whatever the state is going to turn into that it uses this. It's going to be a lot about control. So there's one thing that they don't have direct access to that you do, and that's your mind stream. You have, but they will get it because that's what they're shooting for. It won't work, but in the process of trying to do that, a lot of people are going to suffer and be imprisoned in other ways. So I would say just go slow. Sometimes I tell people, just like I did, don't use your phone to work with your meditation, because eventually it'll be reading your heartbeat and it'll be reading your all of your vitals. It'll just print them all out. And then there'll be a meditation evaluator. This is a very good meditation. It's a very bad meditation. Yes, you need to do this. You need more water. You need more exercise. Your one knee is starting to will be hurting in about 3 or 4 days. And if it starts to hurt in 3 or 4 days, you start to believe everything the damn thing says. That's also programmable. And I'm not a programmer. As I said, I'm a deprogrammer, if anything. Maybe not even that. Don't need a credential. So I would say just keep an eye on the whole situation and keep your distance. Don't use it any more than you have to. Sometimes if you're going somewhere, you need to use the eye in the sky that tells you where your car is driving. So it's as you said in your question, it's difficult to just break away from the whole thing without the spiritual distancing that takes you into retreat. Some of us who go into solitary retreats for any length of time, I used to have people leave everything, all their phone and everything outside of the retreat. And now, because of get used to it, what if there's an emergency? So that's what the everybody, Wikipedia and Twitter and Facebook, they all want control and power. You can tell. I mean, I needn't go into any detail there. It's all over the place. Everybody's trying to get control. And now that the medium is different than just a landline, it's getting extremely exotic. So I would say there's one thing that's more exotic than any contraption they can come up with, and that's your mind. So don't miss your life by fighting with anything. Just aware. If you're aware, then this it's not even, this is the ultimate algorithm. It's because it's not an algorithm. It does not register space, time, all that's gone. And that's terrifying to ego. So therefore, to train your mind, it's going to be scary. That's why I'm here. I had training from Mahasiddha, the Vajra master. He was a powerful teacher. And yet he had all kinds of people always pick on him about he did this and he drank too much and then he chased women or he, whatever. I probably did do all that, but you're still listening to me because of that person. Not only that person, but Coben. So if you train your mind, you can see the illusion of separation is just an astonishing illusion. It's like it's an illusion. It's not. I know it looks so solid, doesn't it? I'm here. You're there. My hand is here. My hand is not your hand. I'm old. You're really young. You're in good health. I'm in bad health. I can see a tree and you can't. I can see a bird. There's a bird. Separation. This is so incredibly supportive of neurosis or of separation and more in psychosis, schizophrenia, all those fancy words that may work or may not. But if you try to use that kind of thing, or if you fight with it, or if you join it, or if you try to be part of it and manipulate it, then you get, because it is such a huge, vast, complex comings and goings and causes and conditions and control consciousness that comes down to that level and wants to control so-called others. And I don't know exactly how it's going to show up, everything from face recognition software. The way they get that going is they make the thing where you can make an emoji of yourself by just let them do that. Now they got you. And of course that might make the hair stand up back on the back of your neck, because now, oh my gosh, the deep state knows who I am. And, not that you're that important, but if you got, 50 million or 3 or 4 billion people, that's a lot of control. Where if they have that and they can go in and reverse engineer that whole situation, so they can come back and send you something that is convincing. Because look what they just did. They just took your face and changed it. Now, one of the interesting things that I'm sure they're trying to figure out how to do this about facial recognition is now everybody's got a mask on, so people can go out and they realize that even if you're on video, and it's pretty hard to. It's usually the shape of the face that gets it rather than the iris or something like that. So it's kind of a contemporary humor that doesn't help much. This is kind of why I wanted to leave this open to mountains and rivers. So if you have other questions in any direction you want to go, because they're so confusing right now, it might be good to do that.
Ondo bowing.
Ondo.
How do you think technology impacts communication of compassion? I'm thinking of as a therapist, I'm using phone and video. How does compassion, how is it impacted bowing?
So you heard me say before, compassion is an aspect of wisdom, compassion. And there's nobody that does compassion. If somebody's being compassionate, this is not compassion in the way that we're talking about it in this path. Compassion may show up as allowing something to be, respecting something, the confusion or the difficulty someone is having. That's difficult if the temptation to correct them is based on your own self-centeredness, that you know more, you've been through that, and you want to help them because you've been through so much. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying you couldn't. Of course, you're going to be able to help people. The relative help is very important. We need to help people, especially somebody has a flat tire. If you can, help them. But if someone needs whatever it may be. But directly to your question, the communication seems to be stronger between. Look at what we're doing here. People are all over the world here, and I'm talking, and 20, 30 people or something like that are participating. But I think it might be good to look at the idea of compassion. Compassion isn't a feeling for something, or it doesn't. This isn't something I'm getting out of a book. It's something I'm looking at. It is about not separate. You're not separate. If you're not separate, if you know that what you're looking at is you, then the way you attend to different things comes out of awareness rather than out of somebody. This person's hurt, that person's not. And I'm not saying it doesn't take that kind of a shape if it's like a hospital where the people coming and going, or a medical center, or a therapist, as the kind of work that you do with people. It needs to take those certain kinds of forms, and those kinds of forms are going to be further and further, I could say the word invaded, because people that create that stuff want control. They want, I'm just generally, I wouldn't say everybody does, but even Steve Jobs, who was an incredible control freak, we shared the same Zen master, except the difference might be is I practiced and he practiced. That's the difference. And you know what I'm saying. I did what I thought was practice. He did what he thought was practice. Go ahead, Ondo.
Fine. Do you think you would have been as connected to Trumpa if you had been only over the bowing?
I kind of doubt it, but it's difficult to kind of backtrack and look at it because the causes and conditions are so, to say they're complicated is an understatement. I had to sit in front of him alone, but that was just me. I'm not saying other people who've never met him don't consider them their root teacher, because his writings. I first met him through his writings. That was scary enough. In 1973 to start reading The Structure of Ego and Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which I highly recommend you read 100 times. It's powerful teaching, and it's somebody who is in his native language. That consciousness has been around for many, many centuries. It just happened to show up as the Vidyadhara. But it's not, it was not that was, I'm not, this is not magical thinking here, and I'm not drawing any conclusions. And I say, on top of everything, don't believe a word I say. You could listen. You might realize that your particular perception, your consciousness, don't belong to anybody. You might realize that the particular karma that brought you into this world gives you a certain hands, gives you certain kind of shaped head, all that a certain skin color. There are just innumerable things that are going on. And then if you have 100 people that are all, what do they call that when there's multiple births? Probably not 100, but 6, or twins. Just like look at the difference between Michael and Michael's brother. Big. I mean, they look alike. Well, kind of, except Michael's more handsome, probably. But look alike, but a lot of difference in the way they live their life and the way they're doing things. So they have a lot of similarity. So I would say that with Trungpa Rinpoche, I personally need to meet him, but without being there's no kind of magical thinking. But I met him way before this lifetime, and it's not, as I say, don't believe it. Not to believe anything. I'm not here to convince you. It's not a fact. Facts are relative truth with a stopwatch. As Suzuki Roshi once said, and they made it a title of one of his books, not always so. You can't find anything that's always the case. It may be granite for 1,000,000 years, but then it changes to something else. So a deeper or further or more expanded question around technology, Ondo?
Sensu bowing.
Sensu.
In my work, I encounter quite a few people who tell me that they don't believe that there's a virus, and they go on from there, that this is a government ploy.
Yeah.
And when that comes up, it often feels like a brick wall.
Yeah, it's not a brick wall.
I don't know what to say.
You can't meet a person that isn't a brick wall. But go ahead. I apologize for interrupting. Go ahead, Sensu.
I'm just wondering what my responsibility is. Bowing.
Just receive. You're not going to be able to, just like we're not going to be able to completely take down the crazy racism that's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. You can't just knock it over. People have to transform themselves. Have to transfer there's a reason that your skin, my skin, and everybody else's skin, regardless of color or shape or age or anything, but we're separated from each other. You get this much autonomy. This is your school. Go to school. Be a student from now on. Stop teaching everybody. Don't teach unless you absolutely have to. Don't do it. Please don't. Don't do it. Don't interfere with other people. And your function as a therapist, I'm not saying you wouldn't use certain techniques or ideas about how to help somebody as you see different ways that you could work with them, but always work with them and be on receive and say, and be on receive. And you'll be, if you're really, and I know you're good at this, so you're so much on receive that they actually think that you agree with them. That's why they love you. Everybody likes to have a therapist who's also their friend. But let them come to you and find out that you don't buy that. And if they find it that way, then they already have a very smooth path of relating to you where you're very, you're very accessible style personality, not a compliment, just a description. Your kindness or your spontaneity is very natural. It's not ramped up in order to control people. You don't even want to control Romi. Sorry, that's very funny. But just receive. You see, like your idea about it showed up as it's a brick wall. Just receive that, because that was your projection. So just receive the projection. Create an atmosphere, and it isn't about creating. It's just stop filling up the completely open dimension of being with our ideas and our bull. I mean, I'm doing it right now. Obviously, I'm running my mouth. I do this every few days, but I never know what I'm going to say. I don't know now. It says I listen to you and I say just receive. I'm not saying that someone else might not ask me a very similar question, and I might say, you need to get out of there. Stay away from them. Don't be around them. It's dangerous to be around them. Or I might, some kind of advice may arise out of causes and conditions that I look at when they're presented to me by, anyone, one of my sons or my daughter or my wife or one of my students. I might change directions about that, but it's in your function there as much as you can. And I know you're doing everything on Zoom, but as much as you can receive, and then extend the receiving by asking and without interrogating, but ask about really tiny things about them, so that there's more. And you could use the word trust. They might use it, or anybody might use it. I don't really use that so much as they get to know you and they hear, and there's more of a chance they may listen to what you would actually respond to. It would, but you can't really come out and say, it looks like your ideas are cement or solid rock. You're not willing to budge. You're fixated. They're probably not ready to hear that. I'm not saying somebody might not be, but it should come be choiceless. It'd be just, that's the obvious thing you have to do. If you put it on receive, this is communication. Just listen. Just look. Just receive. Just be genuine. You're not really separate from the person you're talking to. I'm not separate from anyone here. Separated somewhat, but not separate. Further question about that? I'll send you. Okay.
Shadow bowing.
Shoto.
You mentioned a little earlier, and I think you mentioned this before, how perception or consciousness doesn't belong to anybody.
Yes.
Is there a quality, or is the perception sovereign? No.
Consciousness is sovereign, but the word doesn't even apply because there isn't anything else. So the perception part of it, where it shrinks, you could say, shrinks down into a particular perception of something. That's where the illusion arises, because it looks like there's something else instead of the subjectivity, objectivity are fundamentally not two different things. But that has to show up in the consciousness and the understanding. Then this is called liberation. Then you're actually liberated. It's an astonishing situation where nothing has occurred. It's just a whole lot of things have stopped happening. And one of them is the panic of losing control. And that's based on thinking there is somebody who can control, and there's something to be controlled. It is a grand illusion. And so, coming back to your question, as I say this, when I say coming back to your question, that's a phraseology. That's actually a phrase filler, because when I say that, I want to help you. When I'm starting to say, coming back to your question, I have no idea what your question was. I have no idea what I'm going to say. I just use language, or language uses me so that I can communicate. So regardless of what you do, I just say it. I meet you where you're at. I don't meet you with answers, with ideas, with beliefs or opinions. I don't meet you with anything. So when you attain realization, we won't have much to say to each other.
Shadow bowing. how do I see what you're pointing to and not just matching up a description to an experience that I think is what you're pointing to?
Oh, thank you. All you do have to do is watch that you're coming to a conclusion about it. Just watch the conclusion. Because just keep it as radical and simple and minimalist as possible. So you just watch the conclusion part, because that's the ego. Now, when one the conventional way, when one is realized or liberated, the ego still functions. It will still, but there's no demand. So you would still grasp for this. You would still make a sandwich. You would still write a poem. You would still review a book on Amazon. You would still function just fine, but there would be no, the separation would be maybe show up to others, but generally it would just show up to you that there wasn't anything else. That everything is just a vast ocean, to use a big metaphor, even bigger than that. And that the appearance of being a little grain of sand, this is where the grain of sand metaphor comes. And when you realize this, you realize that it's an incredibly vast, expansive physical situation, and that aspect of it is like you're a grain of sand, you're nobody. And then the realization going deeper, as I used the metaphor earlier, then it changes from the grain of sand into you're the desert. That's the final stage metaphor for the stage before you, the final realization, which is nothing in particular. So continue to do, Shoto, continue to watch your mind do that. What I hear there as your Dharma teacher is awareness. And I see that you're in a particular area. I don't call it a stage, because then it looks like everything's stair steps, and it's not. Stage 3 is actually the beginning. Stage 18 is the middle, and stage 54, of course, is the end. Well, no. It's actually further than that. And I'm being silly, but I'm just saying you can do that all you want, but it does not, all it does is satisfy the self-centered, the ego mind that's worried about success and failure, life and death. There's nothing can die. I'm not saying you won't hurt or won't be suffering. I've been getting some extra teaching these days by having sharp prongs stuck in my leg. Quite helpful. Doesn't feel good. I don't like it, but it's helpful to get a really intense dose of the abrasion of your nerve endings. In this case, it's not even the nerve ending, it's the train track that leads to them. It's the nerve itself. So, but to observe that, to actually observe that without abandoning that for your ideas about it. Difficult. And coming back to your question, Shoto, that's what you're saying. How do I do that without bringing some other kind of idea around it to see if I can shimmy up a tree without a tree? More? You have more? That's a good one. We could go further if you have it.
Sure, going. Yeah, the area that's coming up for me is just a general speediness or impatience with things.
Yes.
And when I reflect on your teachings, it doesn't seem like that's something I'm encouraged to stop doing, but rather to watch it. So does that speediness come out of a misunderstanding or confusion?
Yeah. I think there's to find any kind of first cause around that is it may be helpful, and if you're using psychology or anything like that, then you would look for, or if you're programming or using that kind of problem solving, then that works. The difficulty with that is it's always half measures, and not the kind of half measures that I talk about to use as helping to train the awareness. But they go so far, and then we kind of settle because we realize that we can do this forever. You know, it's like it's some kind of ongoing process that's very repetitive, that's just circular. And so what I say is stay with the first thought of the first thing that happened, rather than to use the very first thought or first impression or first perception of that. use that just because that's the mode that it shows up in, is to go a different direction or expand on that, or start to learn to crochet. You know, you could actually just stay with the crochet needles. Leave them on the counter, but don't take your eyes off from them. In other words, don't shut down on the perception of whatever is there, or add your ideas to it, or grasping, or modify what is there into something that is more palatable or more acceptable. At least I feel like I'm making some progress. You can't make a true spiritual path headed for ultimate truth, transcending this world, without leaving it. Transcending this world, whether you leave it or not. It's not, the whole body-mind complex looks so very important, and it is important, but it's not everything. It's very limited. It's very ignorance. It's very focused. Sometimes people who run into how vast and how limitless, it's an understatement, this world is, if there's still some kind of a essence of self-centeredness happening, it can get very frightening, very difficult. Sometimes that individual could just close off for the rest of that life and just do something that's safer. And we all know people that are very, very intelligent, maybe more intelligent than you are or I am, and yet because of fear, they've closed down, and they have a little Trungpa Rinpoche called it a cocoon of our beliefs, opinions, ideas, what we vote for, what we like, what we don't like. We even say it, and you'll even hear it in people's phraseology. Well, I've always believed. Well, do you believe that? What do you think about what I'm thinking about? And we keep that endless merry-go-round that we don't even know is spinning going. We think there's actually a person getting somewhere, or warding off danger, or failure. That's the other one, success and failure.
Shadow bowing.
Yes.
Is an appropriate expression of my life happen to just be more intense and speedy than some other people?
Sure. Yeah, you're just, for as big as you are, you just move awfully fast. Yes, not to make light of that. Yes, yeah, your style is very, you think very fast, and you jump around to one thing, not a criticism, just a description of the way your mind works and the way you think. It's highly on the move all the time. And I'm not telling you to stop doing that. I want to help you where you're at and meet you where you're at. And everyone here that I've talked to or interacted with a lot, as I said, I don't read minds. I don't need to, because everything you are and everything you're doing and who you are and who you think you are and your very cover up of your Buddha nature, which shows up as what? Your ego, or your, no matter how refined and kind and tentative it is, and even humble, it can be seen. And not just because I'm so wonderful, because I'm nobody. I manifest as a personality, have a pretty strong personality. I'm sure you've noticed, but there's nobody home. There's no being here. There's no solid person there. You can realize this. It's an astonishing thing to be nobody and everybody at once. Astonishing. And you don't have to do compassion. You are compassion, but you won't do it as an individual, because you'd explode if you actually allowed your radar to go in every direction. That would be that you'd blow up if you did it in a relative individual sense of having concern for everyone that you have affiliation with, I guess you could say. So just go slow. And that means going slow for you, Shoto, might be, way at the other end of the ball field before the game's even begun. And then you would look around and say, did I win? Or did I? And I would say, yeah, you won. You won. If there's compassionate people around there, they'll play along with you. Yeah, you don't have to change. I can say this to everybody. You don't have to be somebody else. Just find out who you are. Find out who you fundamentally are, not just your surface personality or or being a therapist, or being a doctor. I'm just looking around, or being an artist, or being a little child worshiping the Buddha. Does everybody see the picture of Romi in Gassho? And he just made an offering to the Buddha. He put a piece of chalk on the Buddha's head and then went into Gassho. And he was, I don't think he was ordered to do that. So there's Buddha nature showing up in a little tiny person. And he's probably going to be, when he's about 12, he's going to start going to the Christian Scientist.
It's a picture on my Zoom page right now.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Oh yeah. That's him. Yeah. For those of you on YouTube, you'd have to be on Zoom to see Kambaiho or Romi. Yes.
Bowing, we could go ahead and close.
Okay.
Unless there's one burning question. You do have some interviews this afternoon, and then
Okay.
we'll be back at 3:00. Are there any other announcements that need to be made from the monastery for you to dedicate the merit? I'm not sure.
We'll reconvene for sitting at 1:30. Other than that.